Ever get that, like, shivery feeling? You know that one from nails on a chalkboard?
Oh, yeah.
Or maybe there's a certain smell that just kind of throws you off. We all have those weird little sensory things.
Yeah, yeah, totally.
But, like, what if those sensations were, I don't know, cranked up?
Mm.
Like way up to
Mm.
11. That's what we're diving into today, that world of supersensory processing,
Hmm.
particularly for people on the autism spectrum.
Right.
And get this, you specifically asked us to unpack something kind of unexpected, a fear of buttons.
It might sound surprising, but for some people with autism, those everyday fasteners, they can be a real challenge.
Yeah,
And it's not just, no, I don't like how they look.
right. Yes.
It's a whole different thing.
Right. This isn't just, oh, I prefer snaps.
Right.
This is about how the brain actually processes that sensory information,
Absolutely.
which is something we know you're already pretty familiar with.
Yeah.
And this cheap ABA article, Autism and the Fear of Buttons, a Sensory Challenge.
Yeah.
It really digs into why something as small as a button
Right.
can feel so overwhelming for some people.
Yeah.
So tell me more about this.
So the article explains how the sensory system can get kind of stuck almost on a button's texture.
Okay.
Like it can't move past it.
Mhm.
Imagine feeling like that scratchy feeling of, say, a wool sweater, but it's like sandpaper against your skin.
Okay, ouch. I can see how that would be really hard to handle.
Right.
The article also mentioned how the shape and even the color can be a factor too, right?
Totally.
It's like the brain has trouble making sense of the whole entire button as a package.
Absolutely. It's not just one element, it's the combination of things.
Right.
And it's really interesting how the article talks about past experiences playing a role too.
Okay.
You know, imagine a scenario where maybe a button was pulled off painfully.
Ouch.
That event might create this lasting association in the brain where it links all buttons to that negative sensation.
Wow. That just makes my brain spin, to be honest, to have something so common, so everyday.
Yeah.
Like just a button cause that reaction from people.
Oh.
It makes you realize how much we just take for granted
We do.
when it comes to sensory experiences.
Absolutely.
It really highlights how different everyone is
It does.
and how we can't just go around saying, oh, they're just being picky.
Right.
Like this article really drives that home.
Yeah, it really does.
This is a phobia.
Yeah.
This can have a real ripple effect on people.
Absolutely. It can impact, their clothing choices, the activities they participate in.
Right. Exactly. Like I can totally see how a kid
Yeah.
who's already trying to figure out the social world might just say, nope, I'm out,
Yeah.
if they're worried about buttons.
Especially a child who's already dealing with social challenges, on top of that.
Right. Exactly. It's like, why add another layer of stress, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And thankfully, the article doesn't just leave us with a problem.
Right,
They actually
right.
offer some solutions as well, which is really nice.
They do.
One that really stood out to me was this idea of sensory accommodations. Tell me a little bit more about that. What are we talking about here?
So it can be as simple as, swapping out buttons for Velcro.
Yeah.
And look how much athletic wear is taken off,
Right.
People love Velcro.
Right. It's not about ripping off all the buttons in the world. It's just about having those options.
Exactly. Exactly.
Okay. So being mindful of the environment and maybe offering alternatives.
Yeah.
But what about those situations where you can't avoid a button?
Right.
Like say there's a school uniform.
Right. Well, that's where the article talks about the importance of sensory breaks. Having that safe space or a planned activity where someone can kind of reset and regulate that sensory input.
That's a really good point.
Yeah.
It actually ties into something else you were talking about earlier about therapy
Yeah.
and how that can kind of help rewire those negative thought patterns in your brain.
Right. Because our brains are amazing, they can learn to respond differently.
They really, really are.
And CBT, or cognitive behavioral therapy, the article talks about how that can be really effective in these situations.
No, sir?
It's like it's teaching the brain to create this new pathway.
Wow.
So instead of having that automatic fear or anxiety response to a button, it learns a new response.
Okay, so it's not about erasing the sensitivity. It's about
Yeah.
giving people tools to manage it.
Exactly, exactly.
Well, I love that.
And occupational therapy as well.
Okay.
That can give people coping skills for sensory overload
Got it.
in general, not just buttons.
So building up that toolkit to kind of navigate the world.
Exactly.
But, beyond those practical things, something else you said earlier that really stuck with me
Yeah.
is this idea of community.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because you can have all the tools in the world, but if you feel alone,
Right.
like nobody else understands,
It's so isolating.
that's really, really tough.
It is. And this article really highlights how important it is for people, for families,
Right.
to know that they're not alone in this,
Just to be able to connect with other people who get it,
Yes,
who have been there.
absolutely. And, online groups and forums.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Those are fantastic resources that were highlighted in the article for support, advice, even just sharing stories, finding that validation,
Validation, yeah.
which can be huge.
Huge. And, it's a good reminder for all of us that support comes in so many forms,
It does.
whether it's practical solutions,
Right.
therapy, or even just finding your people online or maybe in person.
Absolutely.
Like, it all makes a difference.
It all contributes to, I think, a more understanding and inclusive environment for sure.
Yes, I love that. It's wild how this whole thing started with buttons.
Right.
And it's like opened this whole conversation
Yeah.
about sensory processing
Yeah.
and how we all experience the world so differently.
And how important it is to,
Yeah,
understand those differences and not just dismiss them.
exactly. This one article
Yeah.
has really just scratched the surface here.
It really has. There's so much more to this.
And it really makes me think, if something as, I don't know, seemingly small as a button
Right.
can be such a huge, huge deal,
Yeah.
what else are we missing?
Exactly.
What other kinds of sensory challenges are there
Yeah.
that maybe some of us are just walking through the world, not even fear,
Right. Totally oblivious.
thinking about?
Because if it's not our experience, it's hard to really grasp.
Right, exactly.
And that's why this awareness is so important.
It is.
And this article is a great starting point
It is. It really is.
because it gets those wheels turning and it helps people to start to question their own assumptions, And
Absolutely.
to have more empathy and understanding for people who experience the world differently.
And maybe even just be a little more observant, like
Yeah.
just take in the world around you.
Absolutely be present.
And maybe you'll notice something that you never even thought about before.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So to our listeners out there, that's what we'll leave you with today. That idea of just taking a moment
Yeah.
to really tune into your senses.
Yeah.
Like, what do you notice out there?
What feels comfortable to you, what doesn't.
Yeah, what feels comfortable, what doesn't.
Right.
Because you never know. It might just give you a whole new level of understanding.
Absolutely. It might spark a conversation.
Yeah.
It might inspire you to make a change.
Yeah. And even if it's just a little one, those little changes add up.
They really do.
So keep those brains buzzing, everybody, and we will catch you next time for another deep dive.
Absolutely. Thanks for listening.